Welcome to Aston Means Business, a podcast from Aston Business School. My name's Steve Dyson. I'm a journalist who's interviewing some of the UK's top business experts here at Aston. This podcast has been going since October 2019, and there are now more than 45 previous episodes that you can find and listen to by simply Googling Aston Means Business. Today's episode is entitled How Executive Leadership Apprenticeships Can Drive Organisations' Talent Development. We're going to explore this subject with Terry Hodgetts, the Director of Corporate Client Solutions at Aston University, and Lloyd Parsons, Director of the MBA and Chartered Management Institute programmes at Aston Business School. Hello, Terry and Lloyd.
Hello, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Steve. Likewise, thanks for having me, and great to be back on the podcast.
Terry, you first. With so many businesses out there striving for talent development, there's going to be a lot of interest in how apprenticeships can help. To start us off, what exactly is the Level 7 Executive Leadership Apprenticeship?
The Level 7 Apprenticeship is a programme we've been running for several years now at Aston, and it's probably worth just putting this into context. The Apprentice Levy was launched in the UK in April 2017 and provides a route whereby businesses can access funding to support higher level apprenticeships at level 6, which is undergraduate level, and level 7, which is postgraduate level, in a wide variety of subject areas and areas of expertise. Specifically, our level 7 senior leader apprenticeship is aligned to the standard that was set by a trailblazer group, a group of employers that got together to define their view of the requirements for what a senior leader in business needs to be able to demonstrate in terms of their knowledge, their skills, and their behaviours in order to be effective at that level in an organisation. And this programme originally was mapped against the master's level MBA standard for the university, but with some changes to the standard as it was published by the regulator, we now offer this as a postgraduate diploma with the option to continue on to an MBA.
Thanks, Terry. So, Lloyd, who is the Level 7 Executive Leadership Apprenticeship aimed at? Who are your typical students?
So, Steve, I think the fabulous thing about these programs is that there is no real typical student and no real typical organisation. We, of course, will have students that maybe come more consistently from different areas. We have people from traditional financial services, from a wide variety of businesses, tech firms, etc. But we also have people from tertiary sector, from civil service, from the NHS, from a wide range of employers. And I think the key thing here is, as Terry has already mentioned, we operate this program as a postgraduate diploma in business administration attached to the Level 7 Senior Leader Apprenticeship. And the important thing is, if you're leading people, if you're leading a department, a function, an organisation, within any scope of what would go into organisation, then the Senior Leader Apprenticeship program could well be for you. It could be a program that may help you develop and push and drive your organisation forwards. And therefore, there isn't necessarily a typical student. There is a wide variety of people that come in to study these programs.
And Lloyd, what can students who take the programme expect? What's in it for them? Who will be leading the courses and how will they be assessed?
So, Steve, Aston is an institute that has always really prided itself on being able to dovetail the applied area of practice with also industry-facing academics as well. Very much looking at research and outputs and teaching that are very focused on supporting organisations. And that means that the academics that actually deliver on the programme will be a mixture of former industry-facing practitioners, as well as academics that are leading in their fields, their worlds of research. And that brings together a lovely melting pot so that prospective students are getting not only cutting-edge research delivered by great practitioners and great teaching facilitators, but they're also hearing from people who have experienced the other side of the blade, who understand what the work pressures are in an organisation, the demands of KPIs, the demands of meeting your outputs, etc. And I think that brings things together in a really lovely sort of melting pot. In terms of the topics, Well, the program has a wide variety. As Terry's mentioned, this is linked to a senior leader standard. So we aim to give students an overview, not of a single area or function of a business, but a wide variety of all of the different components that go into a business and how it works. Therefore, students can expect to touch on topics of strategy, operations, marketing, and finance, which tend to form the cornerstone of any operation. But a lot of what we do is also focused on the individual, better understanding themselves as leaders and managers, and therefore what makes them successful, as well as potentially areas that they might be able to develop to become more effective leaders and managers of the future.
I understand. And a question for both of you, really. Perhaps you first, Lloyd, as you're in the flow now. How difficult are the apprenticeships? I mean, what does level 7 equate to, and how hard will delegates have to work?
So the level 7 relates to a master's degree equivalent program. So when we're talking about level 7, we are talking something that is pitched at that master's MBA type of field. In terms of how hard students need to work, it's always a slightly how long's a piece of string question. Academia may come very naturally to some students. Others may have to work on it a little bit harder. In terms of who's it for, it's clearly open to a wide variety of people that feel that they have the aptitude to be able to go forward and study at that level. In terms of how difficult it is, I kind of set my stall out in two different ways. The first thing to say is that we absolutely want to encourage and broaden participation in higher education. Therefore, we have great resources, great teaching staff, and we will help and support students in order to achieve at this particular level. The flip side of that is the time and what I would call the grit element. So the time bit is that most of our students, by the nature of what the program is that people are applying to, senior leader apprenticeship, these are people aspiring, if not already operating at quite a high level within an organization. Therefore, time often becomes a premium. So the real reality from the outset for a learner is if you're juggling a important, already very busy professional work calendar, as well as being a parent, being a partner, being a husband, being a wife, being a mother, a father, etc., the personal demands of life, there are only 24 hours a day. There are only 7 days in a week, and that time needs to come from somewhere. So anybody thinking about this program needs to give a real consideration as to where that time is going to come from. And the second thing that I referred to from the learner's perspective is about this element of grit. And really that goes hand in hand with the time element. You need a degree of resilience. And it's not because the program is overly challenging or overly hard. It is the fact that you are going to need to juggle these personal professional outputs. And that is a challenge, and it requires a degree of tenacity and robustness and grit for people to be able to manage all of those things effectively. And importantly, also put your head above the parapet if you need support. We've got loads of support in place for learners and students. So don't be put off by those demands that I'm talking about. But we always need to have that very open and honest conversation with a learner. And that's what our program staff are here to do as well, to make sure that we're supporting learners in the right way. But there's always this trade-off of time and space. Where does it factor into somebody's life?
And I guess that's a reality check that perhaps you can speak to, Terry, being so involved with Aston's clients.
Well, I can also speak from personal experience, having done an MBA myself whilst in a full-time job, doing it by part-time study. I'm very familiar with those time pressures and the pressures that Lloyd refers to in terms of balancing work and family and hobbies and interests and all the rest of it. But I would say that generally what you see on this program are high potential, high performance, highly motivated individuals that are, really ready to dive in and to engage in this process and to kind of almost suck the marrow out of the learning experience as they go through it. And the other thing to bear in mind is because of the way the program is delivered, there is that immediate link between what you're studying in the classroom and online and what you're discussing within your learning sets and your cohort and what you're doing in the real job. You're connecting your work experience to your learning on almost on a daily basis. And it's a very, very rich learning environment to go through. Of course, there are challenges with this, and it would be remiss of me not to point out that there is a quite strong regulatory background that's associated with apprenticeship study. So there is an administrative burden that everybody on the program needs to commit to, and their employers need to commit to, in terms of evidence of engagement in learning, managing and tracking their off-the-job learning in accordance with the apprenticeship regulations, and demonstrating that involvement and engagement through tripartite meetings as they go through the process. We give a full briefing to employers and to apprentices at the outset, and we've got an extremely skilled and competent team that's ready to support them through that process. But there is that additional burden that's part of the apprenticeship regulations that we have to ensure as we're going through this process that we are evidencing that the people studying on the program are doing so in a compliant manner.
No, that's really useful. Thanks for that, Terry. Just an aside before we go on, anyone out there who's listening, if they're listening very carefully, they would have heard two different terms. They would have heard senior leader apprenticeships, and that's how it's nationally known. But they would also have heard executive leadership apprenticeships, and that's what the programme is called here at Aston. Now, Terry, we've discussed the potential apprentices, what they can expect and what they'll face on these programmes. What about the employers? After all, they're not only investing funds, but they're also losing a chunk of time and resource by sending people on these programmes. What's the benefit for businesses?
The first thing I'll say in answer to that, Steve, is that it's critical to bear in mind that this is an investment in capability. It's not a cost of doing business. And with that in mind, there are a number of really beneficial impacts that we see with businesses when they put their people through the program. First of all, there's a sort of a combined commitment retention element to this. One of the big challenges for organizations is how do they hold on to their high performers? How do they motivate and engage them? And by investing in the senior leader program, in the executive leadership apprenticeship, the employer is making a clear statement of commitment in their member of staff to say, you're somebody we want to invest in, you're somebody we want to work with through the long, the medium and the long term. And that builds a much stronger relationship and evidences a commitment which really does help with employee retention. And especially now when the job market is so challenging and so dynamic and we're seeing such shortages in certain sectors, that can be a really valuable tool to help the organization to succeed. And another major idea, I think, that businesses often don't put enough emphasis on is the value in terms of the free consultancy, the ideas generation, the innovation, the ideas, the tools, the concepts that the participants on the program are bringing back into the workplace, and the very real business impact and return on investment means that in the majority of cases, if you look at an employer and look at the direct financial cost, both of the program itself and the learning time associated with it, and compare that with the payback to the business at the end of that process, there's a very rapid and very positive return on investment that's gone through that. The only other point I would make on this is to bear in mind that what we're talking about here is relatively senior, relatively high potential participants in the program. They're knowledge workers. And what that means is every single one of the people on the program is expected as part of their day job to be updating their skills, developing their knowledge, developing their capabilities. What we're doing with this program is providing a structured environment in which they can do that. So actually, when we talk about the regulatory requirements of 6 hours per week in off-the-job learning, you're not actually losing somebody for 6 hours per week because most professional people are spending a few hours per week anyway, upskilling, learning new things, participating in industry forums, whatever it might be. So the actual cost to the business is less than it might at first appear.
That all makes great sense, Terry, but perhaps you can give us an example of how it has benefited an employer who's been on a programme at Aston.
Well, let me give you a couple of examples from work that we've done generally in the sort of management development environment over the last few years. The first was a piece of longitudinal research that we did with the NHS a few years ago that was actually looking at assessing the impact of their leadership development programs. And we were able to demonstrate over an extended period of time significant paybacks in terms of projects, process improvements within the NHS. We were seeing significant benefits in terms of talent development and talent pipelines, both in identifying future senior leaders and trust chief executives on the one hand, but also critically, in some cases, because of the reflection that participants undertake as part of a program like this, it gives them the opportunity to make a really informed decision about their own career pathway. So, for example, we had some participants going through these programs who had decided it was in their future. They wanted to be a trust chief executive. That's where they were aiming. But as they went through the process, as they understood the implications of it, as they understood the responsibilities and the shift in focus that would lead to for them, they actually came to the conclusion that they were happier where they were and they could make a better contribution in the role that they were in. So there were some people moving ahead and getting promoted. There were others who were making a more positive contribution in their existing role, and in both cases, to great benefit to the business. One other example is directly related to the projects, because a major part of the executive leadership program that Lloyd's team run is the business improvement project, which is structured in as part of that program towards the end. And I'll give you one example from a client of ours where we had lots and lots of business projects coming through the process. And just one example of one product development and supply chain consolidation project on a European basis was identifying an increase in revenue of 26 million euros per annum from one project, from one individual that was being implemented. So there's a very real payback that comes from these projects. And of course, every project is different, but the benefit that comes back to the business from this investment is absolutely enormous.
And what about yourself, Lloyd? How would you say that employers have benefited from these programs?
I think to take Terry's last example further, we've got so many cases where students lift the learning from the course and apply it back into the business. And actually, that is the cornerstone and very much the foundation of what the apprenticeship is all about. It's not only being able to demonstrate the knowledge side of things, but can you exhibit this in an organizational context with examples and be able to talk about that experience and really measure it. So Terry's example there about sort of an operational project, we have so many examples of cost savings made from procurement projects, increased revenues from product development strategies. We had a load of students who chose to focus their works and their previous projects around the organizational restructures in working patterns post-COVID. In terms of work from home, over the last 2.5, 3 years, this has massively accelerated forwards. So our students have chosen to exercise contemporary issues and challenges within their organizations and businesses in order to really do a, forgive the cliche use of the phrase, but a deep dive into a topic and think about, okay, well, how does this dovetail between what is academically known about a subject or a topic or a field and how this relates to the organization that I work for as well. And I think there we see plenty of examples where we've looked at things like operational changes, strategy changes, work from homes. How does all of that work going forwards? We've got people considering Industry 4.0, the application of artificial intelligence into their organizations. And the list really is endless. And it's somewhat only bounded by the student's imagination. But I think in terms of the impact back to an organization, again, I would really echo the comments that Terry's led with. And I'm going to slightly diverge from that and talk about the impact to the individual as well, if I may, because I think a really prominent output of this program that we would definitely associate with the students that have come before and have already now gone through and graduated and been awarded, and the students that we have on program at this moment in time, is that there is an expectation that our students will probably be promoted either on or near after the completion of their program. Now, that's a big claim for me to make, and that's pretty much evidenced on what we see with our learners. We take people who have maybe excelled in a particular function, and over the course of their program, we give them this breadth and depth of knowledge. And what that actually allows organizations to do is to really sometimes appreciate and laterally move the talent that they have in the business or in the organization around to have greater impact and effect. So we've seen marketing managers go on to become, strategists and finance directors. We've seen people with technical backgrounds in finance suddenly become creatives. And therefore, the impact to the business, as Terry said, when you look at talent, attraction, retention, development, it's also about being able to broaden the impact that these people can have. And that's something that we see quite often on our program. People are either promoted on or soon after they finish the program. I'm not going to claim that is purely down to the work of our team and our teaching staff, but it is a happy coincidence that in this large period of personal and professional development, we more often than not will see our students progress onwards.
Yeah, that promotion point is really interesting. Lloyd, just for those listening, tell us when the Executive Leadership Apprenticeship programmes are here at Aston, and do they have the same content for everybody?
Sure. So we want to be flexible in the marketplace. So we run 2 intakes per year. We have a traditional academic intake in September, as you would expect for most university courses. But we've also got a degree of flexibility going forward. So we previously used to have intakes in January, but we've actually moved those in this academic year to April. So we had an intake in September, and everything going forwards will run another intake in April. So that gives people a degree of flexibility in terms of working that into their personal, professional lives as well. In terms of the program of study, is it the same for everybody? No, we really want people to have the flexibility to tailor it towards their organizations, their roles and their interests. So how we do that is that there is a common core syllabus, for want of a better phrase. And that's where I mentioned previously that all students will study elements of strategy, marketing, finance and operations. All of that is then encompassed with a large investment of understanding personal and professional development around leadership. And then we give students the opportunity to do the tailoring. And that's where they can take 2 elective modules from a suite of around about 14, 15 modules that we run within the university. And that allows the student to explore things like international finance. It might allow them to explore things like cybersecurity, economics and entrepreneurship. So those optional modules allow the student to really look at their current role and their current organization, as well as maybe their future. Where do they want to go versus where they currently are? And how might some of our modules on offer complement that future career trajectory?
And Terry, a thought from you on how Aston can and does customise and bespoke versions of this programme.
Yeah, I think there are 2 different perspectives to think about. And the programme that Lloyd runs, our sort of standard executive leadership programme, offers enormous benefits to organisations in helping individuals build a wider network, to share and learn from each other. There's a certain magic that can happen in a room when somebody from a not-for-profit organisation is having a chat over coffee with somebody from a large financial institution, and they get joined by somebody from the health service, and just start comparing notes at how they solve problems and how they do things. And suddenly all of these new ideas come out and emerge from the ether to support their development, and those ideas get taken back into the business. But there's also the possibility to do a deep dive. So we have the potential to set these programs up as a client-focused program where there's a cohort just from one individual client, and we do it as an in-company program. And that enables us to really kind of sweat the assets of the group in the room and look at the organization as the case study, build a very strong and vibrant network inside the business, help with thinking about from a talent strategy potential, who is the most high potential, who's ready for advancement, build those networks, build those communications, and really engage the most senior executives directly through the classroom experience, through presentations and networking and events. Engage those most senior executives in the development journey and just getting to know that next tier of managers who are getting ready to move up. So the option is there for employers. They can put people on an open program and they're going to build a wide network and learn from different industries, but they can also think about identifying their own cohort that they could bring together for a more specific and more focused learning experience, that's really taking their business as the case study and working on their business going forwards.
I get you. That's great. Let's have a bit of fun. A couple of quick-fire questions for you both. Terry, first of all, yourself. If you could highlight one reason for senior leaders and one reason for their employer on why to join the programme, what would it be?
I'm spoilt for choice, but I'll try and make it one. For the individual, for the participant on the programme, it changes the way you think. It makes you more strategic. It gives you a broader view of the organization. It helps you to understand how the different functions interrelate and how pulling a lever in one area of the organization has an impact on other areas, and understanding those implications and the way that these things pass through. It's certainly, for me, when I did the MBA through part-time study, it made me more strategic. And that's not just a cliche. It really did. And it helped with the way that I engaged and the contribution that I made. For the employers, it's capability. It's that talent pipeline. It's bringing ideas into the business. It's driving business effectiveness and efficiency. It's generating new ideas. It's opening up new markets and new opportunities and new possibilities.
And Lloyd, what would your top reason for joining be, both for the apprentice and the employer?
So I think for the apprentice, definitely it's about having a curiosity to learn. This isn't about validation of knowledge. So if you are the type of person that is curious about how an organization works, how all of the cogs turn, or in some cases don't, and understanding the reasons why, if you want to understand all of the pieces of the puzzle and how they go together, this is absolutely the type of program for you, because we're not here to try and deliver individualized technical knowledge. We're here to show you this fabulous canvas of things to consider in a business or in an organization. The second element, just to steal a second point on that, would be about the network. The network, as Terry has alluded to, of being within your industry and your context and discussing issues and ideas and challenges and topics with people from completely different fields and completely different walks of life just leads to such a change of perspective and such a wider consideration of these contemporary challenges. So those would be my two key things for the apprentice. For the employer, again, I'm probably going to echo and take further a comment from Terry about talent development, really. In a previous walk of life, I have been a learning and development manager, training manager, L&D business partner. And I know exactly what it's like when you've got highly motivated, highly talented people, and you're looking at your organization thinking, what can we do? How are we going to keep this person? How are we going to challenge them? And really look at the succession planning to get them to become our next senior leader, our next executive, our next boardroom superstar. Well, this, I think, absolutely is one of those cornerstone activities. You look at somebody's career trajectory over the next 2 to 5 years, this type of program of personal and professional development is a fabulous resource for anybody that is in the L&D training field. If you're a line manager and thinking about what you're going to do with your top talent, I think what you get from this type of a program, and I've delivered MBA programs for quite a while, is absolutely second to none. And the ability for those learners to demonstrate and apply what they do within the context of the organization, adding value, adding impact, all of that is a requirement of the apprenticeship. So there's no question in my mind that there is value to the employer, and there is no question about the level of impact that these learners will have over the duration of their program.
Okay, now for potential apprentices, businesses and employers out there listening, where can they find out more and how can they apply?
Google is their friend, Steve. All they need to do is go onto Google and they can Google Aston Apprenticeships or Aston Executive Leadership Apprenticeship, and that'll take them very quickly to the page with all of our apprenticeship programs. And within the page that we have for our Executive Leadership Apprenticeship, there's a big Get in Touch button. There's all of the program information there. That Get in Touch button will put them in contact with the apprenticeships team, and we'll be absolutely delighted to understand their needs, have the discussion with them and talk them through it. The application process itself is quite detailed in terms of the information that we need. And again, making sure we get the stuff through to make sure that from a regulatory perspective, we've got all the information we need. but the team's very experienced in walking through that process step by step and ensuring that both apprentices and employers have a very clear picture of what's involved in the process, the information we need, and how we operate it.
And Lloyd, are there any other routes in for anyone interested?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are very industry facing in what we do. And that means that for throughout the year, we run a series of events which are open to potential applicants as well. So we run something called the Directors Club, and we also run a series called Leadership Matters. These are evening networking events where we have some industry leading guest speakers, as well as students, alumni, and industry representatives that come to those types of events as well. And if anybody listening is interested, would like to come and hear and see what Aston's all about and experience a little bit of what we do, then please feel free to get in contact by emailing abs_MBA support@aston.ac.uk. And we will happily look at adding you to the next invite that we have for a forthcoming event around one of our networking sessions.
Lloyd Parsons, Director of the MBA and Chartered Management Institute Programmes at Aston Business School, and Terry Hodgetts, Director of Corporate Client Solutions at Aston University. Thank you both for taking part in this episode of Aston Means Business.
Thanks, Steve. A pleasure as always.
Thanks very much, Steve. See you again.
And thanks to you, our audience, for listening to Aston Means Business, an original podcast series for Aston University. Remember, if you enjoyed today's episode, you can find and listen to earlier episodes by simply Googling Aston Means Business. And if you're interested in studying anything to do with business and marketing, why not check out what Aston Business School has to offer at www.aston.ac.uk/courses. We've also got a podcast series called Society Matters, which interviews top academics at Aston's School of Social Sciences and Humanities about current issues and concepts which shape our world and the way that people live. You can find those episodes simply by Googling Society Matters Aston. Meanwhile, we'll be back soon with more interviews with some of the UK's top business experts here at Aston. Aston Means Business. Thanks for listening.